Hello, and thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend some time with Homo Irrealis, essays by André Aciman. This collection was published in 2021, and I decided to read this because I don't think I read enough essays. I enjoy reading them, but for some reason, I don't think I read enough. So this collection I came across last year, and I decided to put it on my reading list and got it read, and I really liked it. You know, I wanted to read this because of really about the Irrealis time, and we'll go into kind of what that means here in a bit, but this sort of mood, Irrealis mood, Homo Irrealis, is the theme running through all of these essays. So, you know, the book kind of kicks off, and André Aciman originally grew up in Alexandria, Egypt, and then as a young person, his family migrated to France, and then from there he came to the United States, and he now lives in New York. But in the introduction, really, it kicks off and talks about what this Irrealis mood is. And you know, there's a quote here that I think really kind of explains it. Whenever he's in Alexandria still, but he's looking forward to his life in France to come as they're preparing to immigrate. And the quote is, "I was nursing one sense of myself in Alexandria and cradling another in Paris, all the while anticipating that a third would be looking back to the one I'd left behind once I was settled across the shore." And so, you know, the quote kind of goes on to then explain what Irrealis is, this sort of Irrealis mood of like not really any kind of place or time. And it explains the might have been that hadn't been yet, but wasn't unreal for not happening. It might still happen, though I feared it never would, and sometimes wished it wouldn't happen just yet. So yeah, that's kind of confusing, but it's this sort of feeling of if you're in Alexandria and you're putting yourself into your life to come in France, but then once you get to France, you realize that life that you put yourself in wasn't really quite real. But then when you remember your life in Alexandria, it's not quite real either. And then the author goes on to say, when he left France for the United States, then he started having this sort of longing for this unreal version of France that he had, you know, constructed for himself. And, you know, this to just sort of further, I think, explain this Irrealis mood, because I think it's really important to this collection of essays before we dive into those in particular. There's a further quote that says, "This circuitous traffic that aims to preserve something we know we are about to lose lies at the essence of the Irrealis identity. Whatever it is I am trying to preserve may not be entirely real, but it isn't entirely false. If I am still today creating circuitous rendezvous with myself, it's because I keep looking for some sort of terra firma under my feet. I have no set anything, no rooted spot in time or place, no anchor, and like the word almost, which I use all too often, I have no boundaries between yes and no, night and day, always and never. Irrealis moods know no boundaries between what is and what isn't, between what happened and what won't. In more ways than one, the essays about the artists, writers, and great minds gathered in this volume may have nothing to do with who I am or who they were, and my reading of them may be entirely erroneous, but I misread them the better to read myself." And I love that last part, and I'm going to address that again later in the chat. But that sort of explains, I know it's kind of confusing, but through reading these essays, you really get that feeling, that emotion, that Irrealis mood really sets in, and it's illustrated through the table of contents. So this is the list of the essays that are in this collection, and I'll just run through them and then sort of give a brief maybe description of what I took away from them, or what it's about, what each one's about, what each essay's about. Okay, so the introduction, like I mentioned, sort of just introduces us to the Irrealis mood itself, and then Underground is about this poem in a subway in New York. It's that he reads, and at first he doesn't really connect with the poem, but he sees it multiple times. This poem is on a billboard thing in a subway, and he sees it multiple times, as he frequently takes the subway living in New York, and each time, the poem changes for him. And this Underground is just sort of about this poet. This poem, I didn't write down the poet's name. The poem's name was Heaven, or the title of the poem was called Heaven. It's by Patrick something. I didn't write that down though. But anyway, he engages with this poem, frequently, and then in this way has sort of an Irrealis sort of moment, or period of time with this poem. Then the next essays are called In Freud's Shadow Part 1 and In Freud's Shadow Part 2. And this is about Rome, his time in Rome. He lived in Rome for a while, and his how Rome is this timeless place, right? He says there's a sort of an idea here that time is the busiest thoroughfare in Rome, and Rome is sort of like the unconscious, meaning it doesn't forget anything. So when something happens to you, or you think something, it's with you there somewhere in you all the time, according to Freud. And Rome is this way. This history is built upon history upon history upon history, and so this essay sort of explores that. And then the next essay is called Cavafy's Bed and Cavafy the Poet. This is about Alexandria, the city of Alexandria, and Cavafy's poem he has about he goes to visit this room where he spent time with a lover, and the place is now an office building or an office, and so it's completely different than when he was there. But the poet goes in there and to this room, and but he remembers it, as it was, or rather as he's remembering it, not necessarily as it was, but as he's remembering it. So as he wants to remember it this way. And so in any way, he has this Irrealis, it really reflects the Irrealis mood. Then the next essay is called Sebald, Misspent Lives. And this is about the book The Immigrants by Sebald, and about how people live the wrong lives sometimes, and sometimes you're just living the wrong life, meaning something happened. Like an example would be, like you were growing up somewhere, and then something happened and you had to move away, so you weren't able to continue your life in one certain place. So your misspent life, you feel like your life should have been lived in this other place, but it wasn't. It's lived, where you are. And so, but you have to kind of do the best you can with your life, even with this misspent life. So this essay explores that. Then the next essay is called Sloane's Gaslight, and it's all about this painting. You can tell just from the Irrealis mood, this painting of New York City from the 1920s, and this Irrealis mood. This essay discusses this mood that this painting, this work of art, created for him. Then we have three different sort of parts of this next section called Evening with Romer. This is all about Eric Romer, the French filmmaker, Maud, or Philosophy in the Boudoir, and then Claire, based on Claire's Knee, the movie Claire's Knee, A Minor Disturbance on Lake Annecy, and then Chloe from the movie Love in the Afternoon, it's called Or Afternoon Anxiety. And these are sort of Irrealis reflections on relationships the authors had in the past, triggered by viewing these three French movies. And so that's what this essay explores. The next essay is called Adrift in Sunlit Night, and this is about a Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg, whenever they have the really long days because of the sun, Irrealis, that sort of Irrealis moment there in St. Petersburg. Elsewhere on screen, this is about the movie The Apartment and vintage movies in general, and how people that like vintage movies, they like things that stand the test of time. And this essay explores that. And then the next essay is called Swan's Kiss. This is about Proust, the In Search of Lost Time by Proust. Then Beethoven's Soufflé in A minor is about music and how music folds and refolds time, and how that can create, an Irrealis kind of mood. Almost There is about the word almost and how Irrealis that whole concept of almost is. And then Carreau's Ville d'Avray, this is about another sort of the Irrealis mood of this painting. Again, just you can tell from this painting that this really sets an Irrealis mood. This essay discusses that. And then finally, the last essay is called Unfinished Thoughts on Fernando Pessoa. This is about the Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa, which I have read and chatted on my channel. I will link to that chat down below. The Book of Disquiet is probably one of the most Irrealis books ever. One of my favorite books ever also. Definitely worth a read. So check that out if you're interested. Before I run out of time, I just wanted to address this last quote, the last part of that quote that I read at the very beginning. It's about the artists that are depicted here in these essays. And the quote was, "The artists, writers, and great minds gathered in this volume may have nothing to do with who I am or who they were, and my reading of them may be entirely erroneous, but I misread them the better to read myself. I misread them the better to read myself." I absolutely love this quote. This is my whole philosophy of reading literature, reading fiction, reading nonfiction, reading genre fiction. Everything I read, I'm reading it, I'm reading it to read myself, to get something out of it. And this is sort of what I try to do in my chats, is just discuss my experience that I have with the things that I read, rather than review them from the standpoint of was it good or not. I try to, focus on what can I take away from this. And almost anything I read, there's something in there, that I can read myself in, if I look. So I just love that quote. I will leave the chat with that. I really enjoyed these essays. It really put me in an Irrealis mood, and sort of reviewing the book, the collection again for this chat definitely put me in the Irrealis mood again. And that's a great place to be. All right, I will leave the chat there. My next chat is actually going to be some fiction by Haruki Murakami, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. I have finished this already. I should have a chat on this coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care. Bye-bye.